Welcome back to another episode of the Tommy Brideson Show. I want to talk specifically about the collaboration between a coach and a lifter and why it really is a collaboration and it's not a dictatorship. Now, when we have a look at coaching in general, and if we have a look at a newer lifter, the base of that relationship to start is helping the lifter understand a bit of a process, lay the foundation for their training technique, how they approach their training sessions, how hard to push in a progressive manner. Once you start to get a little bit of a roll on with this and you start to, one, do your own research, two, understand how it feels, what the outcomes sort of look like in real time, in most cases, it will inspire you to start to learn a little bit more, develop your understanding, maybe do some short courses or continue on and, do some further study. Now, as you move into more of like an intermediate and advanced stages of lifting, the relationship between a coach and a lifter changes a little bit. And, I'm in a quite a unique position where I've got a lot of my coaching clients are actually coaches themselves or practitioners. So they come in with a really good mindset around training. They understand technique. They understand the human body. But these relationships become more and more a collaboration because you're working with someone that understands the human body. You're working with someone that, understands the training process. But what they end up working with you for is your oversight on how they're essentially executing. So you're doing a bit of a bird's eye view and you're planning out, the phases of training that they're doing, the weekly sessions, the long-term progression and picture that's going to help them stay objective and, directed towards their goals. Because even if you have a ton of experience and a ton of knowledge in a certain area, sometimes your own perspective on things, especially if you were like say programming for yourself, can really sort of push you behind because you can easily fall into a trap of programming or, setting a plan that you enjoy rather than setting a plan that's actually going to get you towards your goals. But in saying that, the coach's job is to lay a plan out, help you get towards your goals, but you've also got to work with the person that's in front of you because a lot of the time, things will pop up, whether it's a niggle, whether it's, potentially a lack of enjoyment in a training style, whether it's a certain set and rep scheme just doesn't seem to work for a lifter. And over time, as a lifter, you're always self-evaluating. That is the outcome of a really good lifter. Someone that's active, someone that's, really into it will continually be sort of monitoring and progressing how they're training, how they're recovering, how their body feels, what certain exercises do what for their body. Like, for instance, if we had a leg press, a hack squat, and a pendulum squat all side by side, someone could really love a leg press and say, hey, I just get such a good quad contraction with a leg press. But if I do a hack squat, my knees hurt and a pendulum squat really doesn't do anything for me. So, unless you have a collaboration between the lifter and the coach is never going to know that. So if you are in a position where you have a one-on-one client and you're at a stage where you can then have an intellectual conversation around this feels really good for me. These rep ranges feel fantastic when I do it on my arms. My core exercises, for instance, I really feel like I can get a good contraction when I do X type of exercises. That's where the magic really happens because, as a coach, you can look at someone's training videos, you can look at the progress, the comments, the RPE that they've inputted into their program, and you can go, great, everything looks like it's tracking well. But a lot of the time, it's the nuance in the conversation that actually bring out a bigger picture. Now, the reason that, I'm talking to this today is, coming into the new year, I think it's, we're in January. You probably won't say this till February, but we're in January now. And coming into the new year, people come in and, they have a lot of different goals that they want to approach. They want to tackle the year head on. And, there's a lot of collaboration. If you're in that one-on-one sort of, relationship with your coach, there's a lot of collaboration that goes on in the start of the journey to sort of, get you towards the goals towards the end of the year or whatever that may look like. And, if we were looking at someone that is, purely focused on, muscle building, lifestyle approach to training, what you'll find is there are so many ways that you can approach training. You could approach training with like a low volume style training where you're essentially only training a muscle group once a week, where you could also then, for the same person, you could train that muscle group 2, 3, 4 times in a week. And the reality is, as long as sets and intensity is equated for, you're probably going to get a very similar outcome. So that's the collaboration piece, because someone might say, hey, like, I only really want to train my quads once a week, where someone might go, I really respond well, or it feels great when I train them multiple times a week because I feel like I'm training the skill component alongside the muscle building component, and these are the conversations where I as a coach, I really feel you get the most value from. What do you feel is working? Like, for instance, I have another client of mine who, really likes training arms and has, 3 to 4 key exercises that are in rotation all the time for arms. And there's also key core exercises for this person. And I used to program a really structured, regimented way, like sets and reps, the exercises in, a periodized way, in a very logical manner. But it got to the point where I said to him, I'm actually just going to say triceps of choice with a rep range, biceps of choice with a rep range, because I know that he, as a client, is going to train his arms well, but he knows where he gets the most value from in those particular exercises, because I can't feel the contraction that he gets. So, if I was looking at a power lifter, for instance, there's certain requirements that I need that person to do. They need to squat, they need to bench, they need to deadlift. So I probably need to monitor that and the progressions and the supplementary sort of exercises for that. I need to hold a little bit more weight with those so that I'm forcing an adaptation and I'm forcing the change that I want in terms of, training technique, in terms of, the progression that we're making there. But if we look at like smaller exercises, like a rear delt exercise or a lateral raise, like for your delts, or, a calf based exercise, there are so many ways to approach that exercise. And just because that exercise works for one person doesn't mean that the next person is going to get the same contraction. They're going to feel it in the same way. So that's really where the collaboration piece comes in. And I think someone that's in training for, building muscle mass or more of a lifestyle approach, you do have a lot more flexibility with the types of exercises, the methods, the modalities that you use, because you do have a lot of variance for strength training and powerlifting, but there is an outcome. You need to squat, you need to bench, you need to deadlift. So both of them, you can skin a cat in many different ways, but as you get on through this training journey, the collaboration piece of it is so important, because I have a list. So on my back end planner, when I work in my team, I have a list. And as these conversations go on, it's just a matter of noting down like exercises that have worked well historically, exercises that haven't worked well historically. Where have we gotten, really good growth, or what exercises, say for instance, for a deadlift has, shown to get a really good carryover, and that both you and the client feel like you're actually getting a lot of progress out of that exercise. Because if you're making note of these things as you go, you're building up like this system within your own systems of things that work for the particular client. Now, you could give everyone the same program, and for 90% or 95% of people, that would probably work. But as that relationship develops and as you get better and you get more skilled, you want to really sort of dial in on the things that really, really do work, and then work on things that you need to work on to bring up any weak points. So it's less of a dictatorship and more of a, hey, I'm going to set the plan. This is what I think we should do. Is that work with your goals and where you want to go for the training year? Yep, that's awesome. How about we break it down? Excellent. And then you've got that running list of things that have worked historically. And if anything pops up that works really well or works, pretty poorly, you just flag it and keep note of it. So I think, when you're starting to work with a coach and you as a new lifter, you have to follow the process, and you have to be really sort of like, you have to trust that the coach is going to help you on that journey. And as you progress through your journey a little bit, I feel like you earn your stripes to then have more of a collaboration piece, because you're the one doing the training. You're the one recovering. Now, you also need to be coachable, and you also need to, if your coach says, hey, I want you to approach this in a certain way, you still need to do that, right? But it comes together as more of a, you get to play around with a little bit more of the nuances. And that's a really, really fun component of training. Now, as example, I've got a client at the moment of mine that we have a very specific goal. Very advanced at training, has had a really, long history of training, but not just in strength training, in bodybuilding, in cardiovascular training. There's been a long history of training. So this person knows how to work, and they've come in with a very specific goal of hitting a 300 kilo deadlift. But we have a long runway, right? So we're essentially aiming to add 40 kilos to this deadlift over the next 12 to 18 months. And it very much achievable. With the work ethic, with, the previous history of training, is very, very achievable. And the only strength goal is the deadlift. So the rest of the body is really aesthetic goals, is maintaining good body composition, continuing to build muscle mass in a way that doesn't take away from the bigger goal of the deadlift, but also allows this guy to still feel strong, still feel like he's got a lot of muscle mass, and continue to progress in other areas. So we had a really good conversation the other day, and it was around hypertrophy training, and I changed a few variables in his training program that it's not that he didn't like. He was just like, I just prefer not to do that, because it feels like it doesn't clash with his goals, but it will take away from his recovery towards his goals. So, when you look at training stimulus, you have one way of looking at training stimulus is you can use intensity as a driver, or you can use volume as a driver. So basically the end of the conversation that we had was, we're literally just going to sit and we're going to simmer volume. We're going to use volume as the main key driver of upper body training, where we're not pushing up to the 9 RPEs. We're sort of simmering between that 6 and 8 RPE, and we're getting the bulk density of that training stimulus from sets and reps, from volume, not from intensity. And the only intensity we're going to push is from the deadlift side of it. So the nervous system side of things all that stimulus will really come from the lower body, and the upper body will continue to simmer. But unless we had like an open conversation about it and went, hey, what do you feel is working for you? Where do you want to go? Let's find a midway. We kind of never would have got to that point. And I think, when you're looking at this with training is, sometimes, ego gets in the way of, a really impactful conversation, when in a lot of cases, it's really just being like, okay, where do you want to go? How can I help you? It's just providing the best service that you possibly can. And I think, a lot of the time coaches like to have the answers for things, but the reality is the more you know, the less you know at the same time. So really it is a collaboration of coming together and working together towards a goal. I have another client of mine, just as an example, coming into the new year, and they have been getting quite a lot of pain through their elbows. Really, really likes training arms, but has been just getting a lot of pain in the elbows. So I obviously can set a plan, but I don't want this person coming into a training session being like, I'm in pain constantly. So my collaboration piece was, hey, how about we just shift your goals slightly for the next couple of months, where we can work on a rehab component to get you moving better and feeling better, but then we can also still continue to push you forward, but we're just going to have to take a slight lens on it. But without that conversation, we never would have got to a point of change, so I could keep putting down programs and it could be done, it could be executed, but the reality is it's not that conducive to long-term progress if you're training through pain all the time. So I think sometimes we need to sort of, take a step back and go, okay, well, where am I in my training journey? What are my goals? What am I working towards? And, can we have a conversation around that? Because, the plan, when you look at a training process and a training plan, there is very much an art component of it, of, previous history of what has seemed to work, literature, the people in front of you, the conversations, the results that you've gotten, because there's no one size fits all. And you could approach the same different situations in 100 different ways. And the reality is they would probably work, providing there is an objective way of looking at it. So I think, coming into the new year, I think one of the most powerful tools as a coach and a practitioner as well is actually just listening to the person in front of you, because 99.9% of the time, they know what they want to get to. They just need guidance to get there. And they need someone that's objective to sort of sit in the middle and then help plan that out. And, I think if you are that person that sort of knows where they want to get to, but you haven't really sort of, years stacking on, you haven't quite got there yet, you just basically need to find the right group of people or find the right person and approach them with an open conversation about how they approach their coaching. Because the reality is these people will get you to where you want to go, but as a collaboration piece and less of a dictatorship. And that's it for today's episode. I'll see you guys in the next one.